All right, I think we're ready to go.
Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting, March 13th, Trinity County Planning Commission. Before we get started, I'd like to pledge allegiance. Allegiance to the flag.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to open up public comment. During the public comment period, members of the public may address the Planning Commission on any matter not listed on the agenda that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Do we have any comment in the room? Any comment on Zoom? Okay, so we'll close public comment and we'll begin our regular calendar. Item A, Community Development Planning, minutes of February 20th, 2025. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from February 20th, 2025.
I'll second.
Perfect. We have a motion and a second. A vote?
We'll be doing roll call all night because Commissioner Fall is on Zoom.
Correct.
Commissioner Harper, how do you vote?
Aye. Aye.
Commissioner Fleets, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fall, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair Barrett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you.
So on to item B, Community Development Cannabis, minor text amendment to Title 17.43.051.
Chair, just a point of order. This is County Council. Carol Fall, you should disclose whether you have anybody in the room that's 18 years or older before making any sort of decisions.
Correct. Thank you. Yes, Pat Frost is here and in and out walking the dogs, but he will be listening to parts of the meeting, I'm sure.
And what's his relationship to you?
He is my husband.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And also for Commissioner Fall, I'd like to bring to your attention, we were provided a document today that is different from what was given in your packet.
No, it's different from what was emailed this afternoon.
Okay.
The correct one is online as a memo for 313.
Do you have the ability to see that, Commissioner Fall?
To clarify, so there was a memo sent out earlier today, dated February 4th. Is there an updated memo?
It should have been 313. And
Okay.
my apologies.
So essentially the same memo, but dated 313.
No.
No.
If you're able to get into the Civic Plus agenda, it is the bottommost attachment, and it is a memo essentially for comments received after the staff report was published related to a new application for a well permit on the CCL property.
Okay, so I won't be able to access that while I'm on Zoom.
I can do a share screen when we get to it.
That
That'd be
would
helpful,
be,
Commissioner Ball.
yes, that would be great. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, commissioners and members of the public. Drew Plabani, Cannabis Division Director. The purpose of this agenda item is for the Planning Commission to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to adopt an ordinance amendment of Trinity County Code 17.43.051, subsection A5, to modify the opposition process to allow for scheduling of a Planning Commission hearing instead of the automatic denial of the administrative buffer reduction director's use permit application, as well as exchanging the term Community Development Director to the more appropriate term Planning Director. I can go into more background if you all would like, or we can move straight into technical questions.
Would anybody like some more information or technical questions? No, it sounds like everyone's okay. Thank
Oh,
you.
did Carol?
Carol?
Yeah, just a quick technical question. Is there a planning director by title? Is that, who would that be?
Yes, ma'am. He's sitting directly to my right, Mr. Presley.
And so he also has the title of Community Development Director?
Community Development Deputy Director.
Okay, understood. Thank you for the clarification.
My pleasure.
Any other questions for staff? I'd like to open it up to public comment.
Good evening, Adrian Keys from Hayfork. I'll keep it short and sweet. I just want to speak in favor of this amendment to the zoning code. It is a fix for a problem. We've discovered the problem, and I think it's the duty of the planning commission to do their best to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comment in the room? Any comment on Zoom?
I see a raised hand.
Go ahead, Lisa.
I'd like to echo Adrian's support. Certainly, I don't think it's appropriate that a director's use permit should remove the discretion from the director. So this is a simple text kind of change that will make it more appropriate for the actual permit that's being issued. So I ask you to please approve the recommended changes. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Any other comment on Zoom? Okay, just like to close public comment and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Commissioners?
Well, I'd like to make a motion to approve the recommended changes as per staff's report.
I'll second.
So we have a motion and a second. Discussion?
So I think this addresses the director use permit issues that we saw at our last meeting, but this still doesn't address the actual underlying issue that came forward. And so while working on this, I had reached out to county council and had not heard back yet, but was interested in how to resolve the issue of lands changing hands and allowing existing senior landowners, land users to maintain their rights without having to go through this process. And so this still may not be the right place to do it. However, I think there could be language added to do it tonight in this document, and still allow for appeals as needed. But I just wanted to address that. I would like to see senior landowners not be punished for continuing to do their work and trying to support what's ongoing.
I'll also add that I also reached out to county council and didn't get a response myself. So I think this is a step in the right direction. It's a known problem. Our commission meeting last week was extremely difficult, directly related to this. So I think this is certainly a step in the right direction, and I'm behind it. Any other comments?
I'll just add that I would like to direct staff to bring suggested changes to our next meeting as to how to address seniority issues, so that a senior permittee holder, it's not going to be a permit, a senior landowner will not have to go through the same issues we had last meeting, whether that be included in this document, or if it's more applicable in another document that needs to be refined, I would like to ask for that to happen.
If you'd like, I could potentially provide some clarification to that, point that I think you're concerned about, and it's a valid point. So just to give some, context, I think you may be aware, but one of the unusual features of the original CCV process was that whereas with traditional variances, there's no requirement for annual renewal. So specifically for the commercial cannabis variance, they established that it would need to be renewed annually as a director's use permit. So one of the intended outcomes of converting from CCVs to this now ABR process is that it's a one-time process. So once everyone converts from a previously planning commission approved CCV to an administrative buffer reduction director's use permit, it becomes a non-issue because they then have the land use entitlement for the reduction of that setback.
How many or what proportion of permittees still need to go through this conversion process?
I believe that when we originally talked about, the conversion from CCVs to ABRs, we estimated it at roughly 100, maybe it was 120. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I want to say that when I last looked through and asked for those updated stats, that we were down to roughly 30 or 35 is my recollection.
Okay, so approximately a third or more.
Yeah, 2/3 done.
Thank you for that explanation. So we have a motion. If there's not any more discussion, should we have a vote?
Commissioner Harper, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fall, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Flights, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Chair Barrett, how do you vote?
Aye.
4-0 to approve the changes to the minor text amendment changes to Title 17.43.051. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to item C, Community Development Cannabis, Appeal of Director's Decision P-24-12.
Good evening again, commissioners and members of the public. Drew Bulbani, Cannabis Division Director. This item before you is appeal of the director's decision to issue a cannabis license. The project is P-24-12. A little bit of background. The license application was originally submitted on October 2nd, 2023. On August 16th, 2024, the project was approved and scheduled for license issuance after the 10-day appeal period ended. Prior to the end of the 10-day appeal period, an application for an appeal, which is included as attachment 1, was submitted to the Trinity County Cannabis Division. So the reasons for the appeal application included 6 reasons for appeal. The day that the staff report was published, Mr. Morris submitted additional reasons for appeal, which are included as attachment number 8. So in the staff report, you will see that staff went through and responded to the original 6 reasons for appeal. Given the late submission of the additional reasons for appeal, I did not rebut or respond to those reasons for appeal, but I'm happy to talk them through with the commission if there's any specific questions about those additional reasons for appeal. Would you like me to go through all of the reasons for appeal now and give staff and county council's collective response to those reasons for appeal? Or would you prefer just to get into technical questions and then if and when it comes up in discussion, we can address them at that point?
I think this is probably going to be a contentious issue, so any information you can provide us would be greatly appreciated.
My pleasure.
Please.
So in the reasons for appeal, as I said, there were 6 main complaints or reasons for appeal that were provided along with the appeal application. Reason for appeal number 1, parcel is located in critical water resource overlay zone. As we've previously discussed at other planning commission meetings, the critical water resource overlay zone is only applicable to project review associated with the subdivision of land. Are there any questions about staff's response to that, or is that clear to everyone?
That's clear.
Okay. Reason for appeal number 2. Little Browns Creek Road Improvement Association has been in existence for 45 years. We had a vote a few years ago and reaffirmed at our 7/16/24 annual meeting that we would oppose any applications for commercial cannabis cultivation license applications within our association boundaries. Staff's response is, based on review of the documentation and in consultation with county council, the determination has been made that the issues related to the road association's opposition of commercial cannabis projects and that the dispute is a civil matter outside of the purview of the cannabis division. The county does not enforce road association rules on private property owners.
Thank you.
Reason number 3. The well on the property was inadequate for domestic use, so a previous owner drilled a new well, which is located off the parcel on SPI land with no permit for use. See Keith Greenwood at SPI to verify. The response from staff was, no evidence has been received indicating that the well located on site was inadequate for domestic use. Additionally, see attachment 4 from Keith Greenwood, SPI representative. Based on review of the documentation and in consultation with county council, the determination has been made that the issues related to this well location dispute is a civil matter and outside the purview of the cannabis division. And I will also add, I believe that it is equally outside of the purview of the planning commission.
Thank you.
Reason for appeal number 4. Even the new well has proven inadequate for the existing approximate 20 plant grow in, quote, drought years. A full-scale commercial operation will necessitate the use of water trucks, which I believe is not allowed for commercially licensed grows. The illegal use of water trucks has traditionally not been enforced. Staff's response, based on current county code, a minimum of 3 gallons per minute is required, and the well completion report indicates that a production volume of 4 gallons per minute was estimated at the time of well installation. Therefore, this reason for appeal is a conclusionary statement unsupported by any evidence.
Thank you.
Number 5.
Chair, I have a point of order, please.
Go ahead.
So it's my understanding that the appeal period closes when the 10-day period ends. There's not the ability to continue to add additional items to an appeal.
Thank you.
County Council's online. Could we weigh in, or have you addressed this, County Council?
Is that a question by the planning commission?
So the 6 items that Drew is talking about were in the original appeal. He hasn't gone to the 7, 8, and 9 that are later submitted.
My question to you, County Council, is the appeal period is a 10-day period. You cannot continue to add items to an appeal post that 10-day period in which it was filed. So he's not able to continue to add to an appeal after that 10-day period.
Again, if
So why are
that's
we
a-
considering
it's
this?
like this is a question by a member of the public. If the planning commission would like me to respond, then I will do so.
Ms. Wright, we have your concerns noted. We will address it at the right time. Thank you. Mr. Plublani?
So moving on to reason number 5. The use of commercial water trucks on our narrow private road will have unsustainable impacts on our private road. The expense of maintenance and repairs will fall on our small association. Staff's response. Based on review of the documentation and in consultation with County Council, the determination has been made that the issues related to this are primarily a civil matter and is outside the purview of the Cannabis Division and Trinity County Code Section 17.43, which is the cannabis ordinances. See also the response to reason for appeal number 2 above.
Thank you.
Number 6, the parcel is zoned RR5, I believe, in parentheses, not ag. Response, the parcel is zoned unclassified and there's currently no restriction on commercial cannabis cultivation on parcels zoned unclassified. Would you like me to read the additional reasons for appeal, or would you like to pose that question to Mr. Cameron?
Yes, I think we'll wait and pose that question. County Council?
Sorry, what was the question?
We have a question about point of order. The 10-day period has expired and there is additional
right.
complaints. Is that something we should hear from Director Plebani, or is your guidance to not?
I would go ahead and hear those. I'm not aware of a rule that puts a strict requirement around that.
Thank you very much.
And I would also like to add that in some of the previous appeals that I've had the pleasure of working through, additional reasons for appeal were submitted after the original 10-day appeal period. So I encouraged Mr. Morris to submit additional comments, whether or not they're reasons for appeal or valid reasons for appeal. You all can make that determination.
And you've also reviewed these additional ones with County Council and have responses for these?
No, but I will give you my responses and County Council can weigh in. But let me read through them and I'll give you my response.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so on March the 7th, which is, the date that's reflected in this attachment, there is a continuation of number 6 and then the inclusion of 7 and 8, I believe. So 6, hauling water from offsite for emergency use only. Given known past well history, granting this cannabis license would create an emergency situation when the next drought year occurs. It is foreseeable, thus not an emergency. In my opinion, that is a conclusionary statement not supported by evidence.
Thank you.
Number 7, annual road association fee. Currently, of the 2 parcels, or 11 parcels, I apologize, in this subdivision, in this subsection of our association, the applicant's parcel fee is the only one not paid. I'm wondering if the commission chooses to deny our appeal and grant the license, can 2 conditions be put on the license? I'm not even going to read those conditions unless you would like me to, because we've already answered that in the previous staff responses, which is that, the county does not enforce road association rules on private property owners.
Thank you.
Number 8, there is no on-site water storage beyond the, and Mr. Morris, if I'm getting your notes wrong, please feel free to correct me. I read this as the approximate 10-gallon, is that correct? The approximately 10-gallon pressure tank at the well. Forbearance, should there be storage tanks? Okay, so forbearance dash. Should there be storage tanks required on site that are filled in the wet season so that when the well becomes inadequate in a drought year, they would not need to use trucked water. There are 2 2,500-gallon storage tanks located on the parcel. So that is incorrect information, to the best of my knowledge. Should there be storage tanks required, it's not something that is currently required by Trinity County Code.
We don't require forbearance or storage tanks on any other permits.
Forbearance is required for diversions because they can't utilize, they can only use water from those approved diversions during the forbearance period. But for water provided by a groundwater well, there is no specific volume requirement for storage. Although I do think that it's probably a sensible choice for people to have sufficient water storage in the event of an emergency or otherwise.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fall has a question.
So just clarification, page 2 of the project background, the staff report says there's going to be a 2,500 gallon water storage tank. So to me, that's one. Are you saying now there are going to be two?
Based on the site plan, which I believe is included, it also references that there are two 2,500 gallon storage tanks, I believe, if I am not mistaken.
Okay. So the staff report is not correct. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff from the commission?
I would just like to ask county council if there's any additional response or considerations for these additional items, 6, 7, or the continuation of 6, and then 7 and 8.
No, I agree with Drew on those points that he made.
So are we moving into technical questions?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a new license. So has there been a previous licensee or cannabis operation on this site?
Based on desktop review of historical aerial imagery, there is evidence that there was previous cultivation on the site. When we did our first joint inspection with environmental health, where Lisa Wright from Flora, Tom Belanco were also present, acting in their capacity as, agent, the applicant. There were also plants that were there that haven't been harvested. So no previous commercial cannabis license, but yes, historical cultivation activities.
And would that have been under the applicant's ownership?
I am not certain, but given that there were plants, dead plants, still there when we went there this year in 2025, my assumption was that they were grown in 2025, in 2024. And I believe that the property was changed hands in 22.
And so how do we kind of deal with people who are not licensed to have a cannabis operation and then apply for a permit, a license? What is the remediation or whatever that's required?
What do you mean by remediation?
I mean, do we treat them the same as someone who totally is following the rules, or is there some kind of requirement? I mean, I'm just wondering why they bend the rule and then come in and do a license and get off scot-free. Was there any kind of remediation required or fine or anything?
So we were not aware of the non-compliant cultivation at the time when I approved the license application. Had staff been aware that there was non-compliant cultivation taking place on the parcel, they would have received a notice of violation with the standard 7-day time period to correct, or then, if they haven't self-abated by the end of the 7th day, then on the 8th day, that $1,000 a day fine goes into effect and is retroactively applied to the date of the NOV. So on the 8th day, there would be $8,000 in fines associated with that NOV. To your question, Commissioner Fall, about historical practices, I'm sure you're aware that, this program was born out of an era where essentially all cultivation that was happening in the county, we could potentially say was non-compliant. Some might have been Prop 215 compliant, but to my best understanding, there's nothing that currently exists in code to address whether or not historic cultivation should impact their current application for commercial cannabis operations.
Okay, so,
County Council, can you weigh in on that comment? I was under the impression that there potentially was code addressing that exact issue.
No, I
That
don't believe
if-
so. I think that's correct. That is, unless their NOV was issued, then there's nothing particular to remedy. If they did have an NOV, some sort of violation on the property, then they would have to remedy that prior to being issued a license. But outside of that, I think it moves forward.
Thank you.
Yep.
okay, so we didn't know that they were non-compliant, so no notice of violation. My second question is, so I'm just unsure why the applicant doesn't have to provide the burden of proof that the water source is on site. Because when I read the staff report, I'm seeing a stamped survey from a surveyor showing that the well is off-site. And I'm seeing an email from SPI, the landowner, saying that it's on their property. And so I'm curious why we don't require them to positively show that burden of proof. Why are we assuming that the well is on site?
Well, I can tell you that we're not assuming, from my perspective, that the well is on site. The final well permit references the APN that's associated with the commercial cannabis license application. In terms of your question as it relates to burden of proof, that's a legal question, so I'll ask that Sean Cameron weigh in.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's incumbent up. I don't know if it's a burden per se, but it's incumbent upon the applicant to give the county enough evidence to show that they have a sufficient water source. So
On
as long as the department finds that, then it's okay to move forward.
Okay. Has to be on site, correct? The water source has to be on site. I mean,
Is that a question for me? Yeah, this sounds like a question for planning.
Okay. I think that is 1743-060C is in the staff report that the water source has to be on site. And so if the evidence presented to the staff, the survey and the email from the landowner, the adjacent landowners, both saying that it's on their property, I'm just trying to figure out how the staff can conclude that it's not on someone else's property.
I can answer maybe part of that question. When I approved the cannabis license application, the documentation that we had and that had been submitted by the applicant as required by code was a copy of the final well permit, which referenced the APN that is the same APN as the CCL application. In terms of subsequently then as part of this appeal packet, we could say there were 2 maps submitted. The first map that was submitted had no stamp, so I requested that Mr. Morris get a stamped version from the surveyor. And then in terms of, evaluating whether or not who actually owns the well, that's, I think, hopefully clearly documented in the staff report in the sense that that is a civil matter that would need to be handled by the courts. It's not something that staff can make a determination based on the information that was provided.
Okay, thank
Carol?
you.
May I ask a question, Carol?
Yeah, I'm done. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good. Deb, can you please put up the item for Carol so that she can see it? And do you mind just explaining to us what the memo that was added today is and what it showcases, please?
So in the body of the staff report, there's a reference to the intent from the applicant and their agent to permit a well that is on the subject parcel that was installed prior to Trinity County permitting groundwater wells.
This is relevant to the 1977 well referenced within the package.
Yes.
And so this well recovering rating, they have applied to do this test or they have done this test? I just don't understand and this document. Thank you.
Yep. So if you look at, give me a sec. I believe it's either in attachment 5 or attachment 6. That's what we referenced in the body of the staff report saying that they intended to permit that historical well.
And
so that gallon per minute that was estimated and that figure that was presented in the staff report came from the email communication received from Flora, which was included as comments received.
okay, so the flow test still needs to be completed on that well, correct? The 1977 well.
Yes, I would say what's up on the screen right now, I believe is the 3rd page of the well permit, and we have the environmental health director here who can speak to it. Yeah, go for it. Take whatever you need.
Sorry, I was trying not, can you hear me? Okay, so this application's incomplete, but I will mention, so we have not received the well rate recovery test because this does have to be done by a licensed C57 contractor, which is a well driller or a plumber, a C36. So that has not been performed yet. I will say that prior to 1989, Trinity County did not permit groundwater wells. And in fact, records were just sent to the Department of Water Resources. And so the well completion report that's part of this was part of the Department of Water Resources records.
Okay, and this is standard and we require it of all the pre-1990 all applications for permittees that have wells pre-1990?
Pre-1989.
Okay.
Just for documentation purposes and verification, because a lot of these pre-1989 well completion reports are very generalized, like township. It's just very, mixed bag, not really confirmation of what's on site sometimes.
Okay. And then do we have any GPS location for this well, the 1977 well? I did not see it in the packet and want to ask that it is on said parcel.
So the, so the second well, the 1977, has not, we viewed a second well inside the well house, and I'm wondering if on our site plan we can show
We'll chime in here. So if I'm not mistaken, element number 4 is based on the figure 3 property diagram that was submitted, as part of the appendix C.
So this number 4, that's that's where the 1977 well is located.
So what I was going to say is that number 4, based on, and I think Christie probably would concur, that based on our observations, 4 is not plotted in the exact location where the well that's being contested is located. It's slightly more to the north. And then number 6, I would say it's approximately in that area. In my opinion, it's probably closer to where element number 5 is shown or plotted on that site plan. So to your question about GPS coordinates, there is some inconsistency between the various GPS coordinates on the well permits and or on the well completion reports, which was a point of confusion, which is one of the reasons that we made 2 site visits out there with environmental health.
Right. But either way, we don't have surveyed, because this is a GIS exercise, and we know Trinity County has very special parcels and lines. So either way, we don't have a clear answer as to if even the 1977 would be within the property boundaries, because there's not a certified map stating that it is. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So just to clarify, you're saying where item 5 is on the map provided is where the 1977 well is roughly situated?
That would be my estimate. If you look at aerial imagery, zoomed in more closely than this property diagram shows us, my recollection is that well shed is not really visible because it's often either it's not under the canopy, but it's under the shadow of the canopy. Even when I looked at the most recently updated aerial imagery that's available on Parcel Viewer.
Thank you. Yes.
2-7.
And 2-8 are beside each other. 2-7 and 2-8, they're the 2 end pages.
Well, 2-7 has it as item number 5.
And I am
Six
referencing
and
2-7.
5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2-7.
Can I just have a quick clarification? So the permit was approved, then there was an appeal, and so this permit is just currently in appeal status, or is it back in an application status because of incomplete well issues, because now they're switching to a different well, or they're proposing to switch to a different water source?
My opinion is neither of those, but I'll let the environmental health director respond.
So the question is, you're asking about the cannabis license or about the well permits?
I was asking about the cannabis license. Sorry. So what is its current status? Is that you have, you had approved it and then it was appealed. And so that's where it's sitting, correct? It's sitting in appeal?
The cannabis license,
Okay,
yes.
thank you. And the water on site is a requirement for the license.
Yes.
Okay. And then we don't have a valid water source at this point in time. But they're
I have a question for council on that. Because everything in there, I actually asked the planning director and the cannabis director earlier and couldn't get for sure on that. But everything says on site. It doesn't specify an APN or a parcel number. So on site is a pretty broad term. How does that work?
So
On site means that the well is right there in what they're using. They're using that area. It's their curtilage, however you want to call it. Even if it's over the line a little bit, it's still on site technically. Depending on how you define on site. It doesn't specify APN or parcel. Do you see what I'm saying there, council?
So does on-site mean on their property, or can it be on someone else's property over which they have no control?
I'm not totally, it depends on how you define that term. Yeah, I don't know of a specific legal definition. I would sort of defer to the industry standard. That's essentially where how it would be defined if it's not specifically defined. So, I would turn it over to the experts, being Drew and the environmental health director.
So to your questions, Commissioner Flights, in my opinion, in terms of how this approval was originally granted, there's a final well permit with an APN, and that APN is the same APN as CCL 805 is applying for the license on. In terms of the question of on-site, there are instances where a site encompasses multiple APNs. And so I think the term site could certainly extend to beyond a singular APN. At this point, again, my evaluation of these documents was that there's a final well permit associated with this parcel. And that is the way that it currently exists. That is the way that the applicant purchased the property.
With that second well was not present when they purchased the property, I thought they drilled the second well. No, the second well was present when
Both
they
wells
purchased
were
the property.
present when they purchased it, to the best of my understanding. It was the previous property owner that installed the more recently installed well, which is the well that's the location is being contested.
Okay, so that well was, you're saying that well was drilled prior to 2022 when they purchased that property?
Eve, that it
2019.
was it 2019 or 2020? It was drilled.
Yeah, our records, it was pulled in 2019. I don't have the exact date of drill in front of me.
Okay. And then just a point of clarification. So has the license applicant requested to change their water source formally? Have they communicated to you that they are planning to change from the 2017 well to the 1977 well?
Yes, and that was, I believe, referenced in those emails that were attached, which is where I got, that intent from, along with the estimated 5 or 6 gallons, I think it was 5 gallons a minute that was estimated in the last week or two when that pump test occurred. We also today, or yesterday, and then again today, received resubmissions of the Appendix C. We sent out a formal incomplete letter asking them to resubmit at the time when the new application, the old well with the new application that has just been submitted was finalized. Because from my perspective, until it's been finalized, we wouldn't consider it a legal water source. And so I don't really plan to approve that updated environmental document until they have a legal water source.
Okay.
Or until this new well that they're proposing to permit has been finalized so that it can be accurately reflected in the environmental document.
Okay, so they had an approved license, it was appealed, and now they have submitted a new application?
No,
So-
they've resubmitted their environmental document.
And that doesn't change their status? That still has them approved and in appeal status, and that doesn't put them back into an application status because they are making changes?
No, it does not, because we allow for modifications of the environmental document post-approval.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
I have a question for Ms. Anderson. So I know when I drilled my well, I just pointed out to the well driller where I thought my property line was. Do you require them to verify somehow through a survey or something like that, that they are recording the correct APN on the well drilling report? I mean, because we know, like Commissioner Flights pointed out earlier, we know how erroneous GPS can be and stuff. So how do you verify that the correct APN number is on the well drilling report?
So the original application that was approved, the location that was approved, was submitted 30 feet by the applicant or the applicant's well driller, from the property line. I mean, it's a good question. Outside of having a surveyed map with that location marked out, we couldn't say for sure that it was on that APN initially, but at the same time, in the last 10 years, in the hundreds and hundreds of well permits I've signed, this is the first one to have a dispute over a line and on which property it was on. And it would make it pretty hard to get a well permit if we were to have everyone bring a surveyed map with them to get the well drilled. Yeah, that's a good question.
Do we have standard setbacks for wells off of property lines? And can you inform us of what those are?
Yeah, I believe wells are 10 feet off the property line. And this one said it was going to be 30 feet from the property line.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? I have a question from Sanderson. This amendment we received today, the well rate recovery testing, just for clarification, that's on the 1977 well, correct?
So this new application
Yeah.
for existing 1977 well, we have not received a completed well recovery test yet.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, staff. This time I'd like to hear from the appellant. The appellant. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Morris.
Good evening, Bob Morris. I am not the appellant. I am representing the Little Browns Creek Road Improvement Association. It's been in existence for 45 years. I've been president for all but a few of those years. I was planning on going through all of the points, but my time is limited, I understand, and they've been gone through. In the staff report, it says all complaints were found to be unsubstantiated or outside jurisdictional authority. Before I get to that, I would like to say that in the 45 years of our existence, we have morphed as needed and not changed our name, Little Browns Creek Road Improvement Association. In the subsequent time, we have applied for 3 different grants as a community, 2 fuels reduction grants, 1 fish and game fish passage grant. So we are more than just a road association, but that's what our name is. As far as the 8 or 9 points, you have the first one about being in a critical water resource overlay zone. I've been informed that that has to do with land subdivision. I wasn't aware of that, but if that is the case, in my mind, my simple mind, I'm not a lawyer, it still would be a heads up to me that there's an issue there. And I believe the county environmental health officer can attest to the fact that lots of wells go dry in our watershed in summertime, in a normal summer, most of them, I'd say, in a drought year. So I hope it's not just totally discounted because it's out of your jurisdictional authority, but look at how it makes sense relevant to the big picture. There's a lot of confusion about the wells. Despite what Lisa Wright said, I've not been trespassing on the property. I was invited there by the listing realtor to show her where the corners were before she showed it. And at that time, I met the potential buyers, the current owners, told them that the well was off the property and that we had officially voted more than once to oppose commercial cannabis in our neighborhood. If it was ever proposed, we wanted to do an opt-out, but decided not to because of the decline in the industry. It looked like that was going to be moot, our mistake, I guess. The old well I need to speak to, looking at the map that Mr. Plabani referenced, it didn't jive with the numbers. Christy Anderson was out there. It's due west, downhill, due west of the new well, which is the one that's just east of the SBI line. It's at the lower end of that meadow where the tree line is where it is. That well, so everything I say is unsubstantiated. I didn't realize I was supposed to provide substantiation. Is that a word? I've lived there 52 years next month. There are only two of us back there for many years, this parcel and myself. They used a small spring on SPI until they were able to drill a well. I believe it was late in '76. And they were very excited to be able to have flush toilets. And they had an outhouse burning party that I was invited to. It was a big deal. Poor timing. The next summer was a '77 drought, and halfway through the year, they had to haul water. So that well is proven to not be producing in a dry year. That's evidenced by subsequent owner Marcus Carr drilling a new well. He didn't do that for no reason. He did it because the existing well didn't work. It was not adequate in a dry year. So there's a reason. If you just look at the big picture, it all makes sense. This is my perspective I'd like to put out there. I was present at the last meeting with the Bibarque issue. And I kind of view our issue as a mirror image of that. That was an existing licensed grow established for a decade with no complaints against it. Someone moved in knowing that it was there and wants to change it. And I noticed how some people on the commission reacted to that and seemingly felt it was unfair to do something like that. And the wording needed to be worked on so it wouldn't occur again. And this is kind of the exact same situation in reverse. Long-established community unanimously voted to oppose future cannabis activities, and the new buyer was told that that was the case, and they purchased it anyway. And now they're applying for this permit. So that's my perspective on that, just to share that with you. Last thing on my list is the applicants are gone. They moved away. It was either August or September. They abandoned their plants, told the neighbors we could have them if we wanted them. They moved back to Minnesota where their family is, and the for sale sign is up on the property, so they are no longer here. So there's that. Do you have any questions of me that I can help with while I'm up here?
Do you have any questions?
Do I have any time left on my 10 minutes?
A little over 3.
So may I use those in rebuttal at a future time today?
Sure.
Possibly, if needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we hear from the applicant, please?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. Tom Palenko, representing the applicant, Bao Li. I think, first of all, I like the staff report. I want to thank the commission and staff for advancing this to this meeting. I know it was a date uncertain, and now that we have it here, I appreciate having this issue while there's still a season to have. Just a matter of clarification, I think maybe it didn't get to environmental health yet, or maybe J&J Pumps isn't licensed. There was a pump test excuse me, done on the 1977 well between the last meeting and now. Came up 5 gallons. I think it was done on the 28th of February. That's reflected in one of the emails. I wasn't there for it. It is what I heard. That's why they're seeking to add this to the site map. Not denying that the other well, let's call it, the well of contention, is still a viable legal well for Bow to use. They did see this 1977 well hasn't been hooked up the entire time she's owned the place. So we thought it prudent at the very least to see, is it a viable well? Produces 5 gallons a minute. So, she's adding it. As far as the other issues that go, I agree with what Drew said. There isn't a requirement for storage on a parcel. I think it's prudent. I would encourage anybody, not just somebody in an appeal, anybody who relies on well water in Trinity County and is going to be relying on the ability to irrigate to store some water, because we know how our seasons get, not to mention fire safety and whatnot. Water storage is a great idea. She's got 5,000 gallons. I would encourage anybody to have more than that who's in commercial cannabis. It isn't a requirement, but it's a legitimate concern. As far as water hauling, that isn't, it is an emergency thing. Nobody can get a license if they're based on hauling water. And that's why we have this water requirement. So pump fails, something happens that is an emergency, and I think emergency is defined or at least categorized in our ordinance. We have that. It doesn't mean twice a week for the entire season you're going to have a water truck going down these roads. I think part of why we have an emergency is for the analysis that we saw in the programmatic about what the impact could be. It's not it's not the primary use of a road. This is a road, it is a private road. It's a road association road. In that road association is SPI. So certainly it gets other things than cars and pickup trucks. It gets heavy equipment in there, I'm sure. I would expect anyway that SPI probably pays the lion's share of road maintenance fees. If there are considerations on the road, that is something the road association can take up. I think that is part of why road associations exist, but they themselves are associations. It's not a county road. It's not a county rule. So again, I agree with the staff report on that. I would encourage the commission to deny this appeal. I'm available if any questions come up to answer. I know Lisa's also on Zoom. She's had long contacts with the applicant, but I'm happy with the staff report. I think there's no question that the appellant is opposed to the project. I can't deny that. However, I think the project meets the environmental considerations and this license should go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I do have a
Oh,
quick question.
Sorry, Mr. Blanco.
So for the applicant, is it their intent that with a sufficient pump report that they would solely use the 1977 well, or that that the current proposal is that they would be eligible to use both wells?
That's a good question. My advice was that they use both. I don't know what they're going to do, but it was my advice and clarification that they should use both. If it should come to pass that the well of contention can no longer be used, they would have the other one, but they're both productive wells. And I encouraged the applicant to use both.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Blanco. I'd like to open it up to public comment, please.
You have more out here? We're in public comment.
That was the applicant and the appellant, right?
Yeah,
So now it's public comment for this, for the room?
we're in public comment for the room right now.
Okay. So any more public comment? Ms. Wright, do you have comments?
I thought the gentleman's approaching the podium. You have public comment in the room right now?
He offered it to you first.
I will withhold my public comment for after public comment in the room.
Okay. Public comment in the room, please.
Out of three.
Keith Greenwood, Sierra Pacific Industries. I'm the district manager for Weaverville District. I'm a little disappointed with the process, but not the planning commission, but the process is approval by default, and then you appeal when the approval was based upon inaccurate information. I don't fault the department for approving the application based upon the information they were given. I think they were given incomplete information and inaccurate information. I do a lot of environmental documentation and permits, discretionary permits. When I submit those, if they're incomplete, they come back to me. I start over. If they're inaccurate, it has to be corrected through that process. If I submit something that's inaccurate, and it can be balanced even at that point. So we're in a state where, there's a lot of discounting of information. And so it's kind of like Perry Mason, where they tell the jury not to consider this advice and that advice. There's a lot of circumstances out there, like the road condition, that's mischaracterized by those representing the applicant. We avoid using that road for logging equipment because of the narrowness of it, the thin nature of the chip seal. It was designed for logging in the past, but that was when it was dirt. Now it's a public use by a lot of other folks, and we put in roads to go around it to avoid it because of that nature. So don't discount the nature of the road and the impacts that can take place on it. And that's an environmental impact. As far as, there were some comments about dwellings being on SPI property. We're not contending that that's the case. A Boy Scout can tell where that line is. Some of the corners were covered up in dirt. And this is the part that disturbs me the most, and I've shared this with others, is that there's been some dishonesty here. Dishonesty from the previous owner, because I talked to him when he drilled the well and it was discovered that it was on our property, and clearly so. I offered him a domestic license. We offer domestic licenses to folks when we think it's appropriate, and commercial when we think it's appropriate. What we're not going to do is try and enable somebody to disrupt the neighborhood. And that's why we offered him a domestic. And he said, I don't need it. It's not hooked up anyway. But I will consider your license opportunity. And so we don't allow people to use water on our property without granting them a license. And so we did offer that to him. And he said it wasn't hooked up. So there's deception there. Did he disclose to the new landowners when they sold that the well was on their property? Either they said they didn't, or they did know, but I talked to them when they were moving in and told them that it was on our property. Okay? Professional
Thank
survey
you.
or a Boy Scout will show you where the line is.
That's your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. Do
Thank you.
you have any questions for me?
No, thank you.
Oh, I do have a,
I don't think we're allowed to.
am I not allowed to ask him a
Public
question
comment,
or
right?
no? Am I allowed to ask him a question or no?
It's public comment, right?
Sean Cameron, are you still there?
Sorry. You can ask a brief comment. Shouldn't be prolonged, but yes. You can.
Based on the maps, is there any reason that the 1977 well would be contested based on your knowledge of the parcel boundaries as to if the 1977 well is on SPI?
No.
Thank you.
Any other comment in the room? Any comments on Zoom?
I do have a comment, Lisa Wright. Sorry, I can't find my little hand. There we go.
Go ahead, Ms. Wright.
Chair, Commissioners, good evening. Thank you for your time. Lisa Wright, Lewiston, District 1, which is the district that this is in, that Carol Fall represents as well. I'm greeting you from Key Cocker, Belize, so I'm on vacation, but I thought this was very important for me to come and speak. That's the reason I'm dressed this way. So I agree, and I ask you to deny the appeal and uphold the director's decision. One of the important things about an appeal hearing is it's an adjudicatory process. So we're looking to you as commissioners to be fair arbiters, to establish an administrative record of fact. That's it. It's not conjecture. It's not what someone thinks or what someone said they did. We have no evidence that's been submitted to support any of the different allegations that are being made, including the additional ones that were made this evening. Director Polbani has thoroughly addressed the 6 main complaints that we also agree with him on. Critical water resource, moot. Little Browns Creek Road has no standing, doesn't have the ability to supersede county or state code. The well on the permit being inadequate for domestic use, well, how would that be known? How would that even be known? So because of the contentious nature of a neighbor, it's kind of like me driving by and I say, you know what? Your goats are on my neighbor's property. I'm going to report you to animal control, but the neighbor doesn't even care. The goats can be on their property. They don't care. Someone down the road a mile contesting that this well is somehow not legal. SPI has submitted no proof or formal evidence. So Mrs. Lee retains her right to a final permitted assessed well on her property. However, in order to pass this and allow her to potentially have a season as a small business, we went ahead and had a well. She did a well test done by J&J Pumps that produced adequate. The minimum is 3 gallons per minute, of 5 gallons per minute by J&J Pumps. Well permit has been pulled. They have a repair estimate to Mrs. Lee that is in process of being implemented. So we don't have any evidence here of anything within the appeal that makes any sense. You can,
Thank you, Lisa.
oh, am I out of time?
Thank you, Ms. Wright.
Okay. It'd be really helpful if you guys put that up because it's hard when you don't know how much time you have left, but I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on Zoom? Okay. The appellant has raised his hand and we did allow him to save 3 minutes. You have a rebuttal?
Thank you for that. Just a closing, 2 things. That old, we're calling it the old well, always had water in the wintertime. It didn't have it in the summertime. The well test that was just done was in February. On a perk test, I haven't done a perk test in 40 years, but they used to be required to be done in the wet season to prove that they would work in the wintertime. I talked to Christy Anderson about, is there a requirement for a well permit that it produces water in the summertime? And she said there isn't one, but knowing that it failed in the dry season, its very first season was never used subsequently, it seems appropriate to me to request a dry season test if you're not going to approve the appeal tonight. And the last thing, the staff recommendations, there were 2 alternatives. I'd like to humbly propose a 3rd alternative. if the appeal is not allowed tonight, that this be continued to a date uncertain, because what would need to be done is what Mr. Polanco keeps referring to, the judicial process, which in my experience takes 1 to 3 years. And so I don't see how you could continue to a date certain if that is what we're waiting for. So that's just a thought on my part. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we're going to close public comment and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Commissioners?
Can I ask county staff some additional questions before we open a motion for discussion?
Absolutely.
All right. Um, County staff that are in the room, is it required that wells are reported on deeds in Trinity County if they have the legal right to said wells, or how does that work?
So the question is, does a well get deeded onto the parcel?
Is it included in a deed when you purchase a property? Does it include how many wells are existing on the property, or if they're similar to if there's water rights? Is any of that annotated in title transfers?
That is something I'm unfamiliar with. I know if you have a deeded right to a neighboring parcel, that would be something that would be recorded.
Okay. Which we don't have evidence from a deed on this parcel anyway. And then, so diversions can be used as water sources for such licenses. And are all of those designated as on-site within parcel boundaries, or are some of the actual diversion sites off-site and then the equipment carries the water onto site?
Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up the mental files related to approved diversions. Not all diversions are approved for commercial cannabis use, number one. As far as I am aware, they have to have legal access in some capacity to their point of diversion. So generally speaking, off the top of my head, yes, as far as I can, pull up in my mental files, all of the diversions which are approved through, in combination, I believe, between CDFW and then also Division of Water Rights. Those I'm pretty sure are all on either the APN, which is associated with the cannabis application, or an APN where the cultivation activities will be occurring, or an adjacent APN that the applicant has the legal right to access said water source. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, commissioners, discussion.
Do we have a motion?
Not yet,
Pardon me?
not yet.
So I think we want a motion before discussion.
So do we have a motion?
Well, I'll make a motion for discussion. I move that we continue this item to a date uncertain. There's just too many last minute things and unconfirmed things, so I would make that motion.
I will second your motion.
Thank you. Maybe just briefly for discussion, I think there are, first of all, we don't know if the well is going to actually meet that well rate recovery. We don't have a valid permit for it because it hasn't had that test yet. As Mr. Polanco said, we don't know if they're going to propose to use both wells or just one. To me, there was a question about what's on site. I'm unhappy with all these last minute submittals that the appellant is pretty much, in the dark about. And so I just think there are a lot of unresolved issues. And so that's why I would like to continue it to a date uncertain.
I don't necessarily want to continue this to a date uncertain. I think that the application is incomplete, that there's a contest, and at that point, over a well, and at that point, that should have been identified as a flag, and then the application needed to resolve that issue prior to getting an approval or a denial and moving forward. And so it's not complete. There is not a verified water source on site that is legally theirs, in my opinion. And I think that needs to be resolved before anything else happens.
Still think it goes back to on-site. And what is the definition of on-site? And there's no parcel numbers on there. So, I mean, you can't say that there's not a well on site that they're available to use that's under their APN. It needs to be contested in court by SPI. And has it been done so yet? No.
So again, there's all these legal issues out there that are unresolved. What's on site? Which well are they going to be using? What's the status of the application? I'm still confused that the applicant can make changes up to the last minute and then really not allow the appellant to revise their appeal or see what's being proposed. I mean, some of this information, like, oh, we might be using both wells, that just came out tonight. So how can an appellant, responsibly, explain why they're appealing?
I agree with that. And I will say that on the bigger picture, water is an issue in Trinity County. That's not a question. Water is an issue. But as our policies and our ordinances currently state, some of the information we are asking is not currently required. Additionally, for the water use overlays and for concerns about dry water well or dry wells in the summer, also not requirements per current code. But would I ask, and I will ask, that we look at addressing that or developing a plan in our general plan revision, that's an item that we look at doing, and not solely for cannabis. It needs to be for all development. We're not going to keep targeting specific things and piecemeal it. We need to have a holistic approach. And so, yes, I would love to see that addressed holistically throughout the county and apply to all types of development, not just cannabis licenses. So I would ask that we work that into the general plan or make sure that we have an item addressing the water use overlay and critical water resources throughout Trinity County, as well as we know we don't have many underground aquifers. And so when we say that wells are disconnected from streams, yes and no. Okay. Now I'll stop there for a second.
So my thoughts are, as Commissioner Harper stated, what is the definition of on-site? We also haven't addressed the fact that the applicant stated that the owner, Miss Lee, I believe is the name, has an opportunity to repair, they have a contract to repair, and that the well, although tested in a wet winter, did produce 5 gallons. I think it's also worth noting that there is an opportunity to punch a new well or repair the existing well at that property, the 1977 well. The water on site, as Commissioner Harper brought up, I think is a poignant point in that The information provided to us from the county states that on that EPN, a well permit was pulled, was tested and signed off on. And it's a very big burden for the county to verify that each person is punching in a well is actually on their property. And we're talking about 30 feet. I do agree with the concerns from the appellant about the road and creating an emergency, which then would allow them to haul water. I don't know if this comes under the purview of the Planning Commission. I don't know that we should be ruling or adjudicating or getting involved in a civil issue. I agree with the points from both sides, but I don't feel we are equipped to make a correct motion without knowing all the facts. There's too much mud in the water. We don't know whether the well is in the right place. I understand we have a surveyed map by a state certified survey office. I understand all of that. But as Commissioner Flights also stated, when this property was bought, I think in 2022, the previous owner had punched a well in 2019. Did the title company provide that the second well is on their property, and did this person buy this property with the understanding that they did have two wells on their property? I also do agree with the last commission meeting. This is a role reversal. I do see the similarities, but I don't feel that the commission should be involved in what is obviously a civil issue between landowners. With that being said, if we were to allow an opportunity for the existing landowner to make those repairs that were stated by the applicant, would that be a moot point as far as the contentious well, the well of mystery? If they punch in a new well and they get their water from the existing well, the 1977 well, repairs or restructure, would that make this moot?
I mean, I think there's still that ongoing point of contention, but in terms of, you know, the administrative review related to approving the commercial cannabis license, I would say that yes, that does make it moot because it would be clear that they have a final well and a, you know, / legal water source on site. There'd be no doubt about that.
Thank you, Commissioner Fall.
But I mean, but until you have that, I don't see how you can actually move forward with approving the license when they haven't provided that documentation yet. You know, they may not be able to repair the well. It may not meet the well recovery test. So you're kind of approving a pig in a poke if you say, yeah, okay, go ahead and approve the license with this unknown hanging out there.
If I may, through the chair.
Absolutely.
I didn't bring this up specifically in my introduction or discussion of the item, but I want to point you all to attachment number 3, which is the final well, the notice of final inspection associated with this well that's the location is being contested. So I just want to clarify that when I approve this cannabis license, this is the proof that is required by code. And it clearly states that the assessor's parcel number, which is associated with this notice of final inspection, which is, I believe, and Christy, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the final piece of documentation that happens along with finaling a well. So based on my review of the application that was originally submitted for this CCL, they have a finaled well that is on site.
But since
it
then, you got new information.
Right, so it checks the checkbox on the checklist to say, did they provide the documentation and, you know, per what they provided, it was valid. However, and, you know, we're saying this on both sides, so the applicant can change things to their proposal, which is what Carol's brought up. The applicant can change things after something's already been approved. And on working farms, that makes sense. Things break, stuff happens. You have to make changes and adapt. That's life. However, we're also not allowing for the other side to say that there's an issue and address that. Makes me a little frustrated. So just when something was contested, red flag, we're here now. But we should be able to look at it from both sides, that if there's an issue, we need to dig into it a little deeper. Not just say this is still valid because it's in question now.
And, Christy, feel free to give me, or give the commission your insight to this. But from my perspective, until, as far as my decision to approve the CCL, until environmental health takes action to change the fact that currently there is a final well associated with this parcel, that stands. And so we've had a lot of discussion with county council about this, and where we were directed to, essentially take this is that's a civil dispute. So if Christy wants to kind of weigh in on what the process might be, if there were to be a clear outcome from the courts as it relates to, civil litigation, that might help to kind of give us more insight into what might happen in the future.
So first, to address that question, or that portion of it, we would need a court decision in order to make changes or to the current documents. Whenever we've had a property line dispute, we have attorneys on both sides weighing in, but really it takes that court decision to make those changes. As far as the questions about the 1977 well, I just wanted to mention that J&J Pumps is a C57 licensed contractor. We have not received that record, so I cannot speak to the record that's being mentioned. Also, they self-disclosed that well wasn't functioning. We really don't go on site and make sure that people are running their well and that they're not using certain wells and using other wells as far as after the well drilling process. So they self-disclosed that was not being used at the time. Otherwise, I don't think we would probably be having the same conversation on that end. But anything else, please let me know. I'll try to address it. But this was, unfortunately, it comes down to a civil situation.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, and just to clarify for Mr. Blablani, I don't think any of the blame is being placed on you. You were provided information to say, hey, look, this is a closed packet. There's an EIR, there's a CEQA, there's everything there. And the closed well permit, as you correctly stated, shows that the well on that property is producing, which meets the requirements for their license. So I see it as we have the issue of the well on SPI. I'm certainly not going to get in a disagreement or discussion about a licensed surveyor. If they say where it's at, arguably, that's where it's at. As far as the existing well, which Ms. Anderson stated, we are waiting from the report from an accredited test facility. That well, pending providing the information that we've been told tonight, creates 5 gallons, which meets the criteria for the license. So if the applicant is willing to repair and maintain or install an existing well, I don't see the problem. If they're willing to say, hey, I don't want that SPI well, it's not on my property, it's not mine, and we're going to maintain the one that we have, and that one meets the criteria of our license, then I don't see the issue.
Well, I'll just add, I don't think we want to make any decision on the contested well. So we would just be making something contingent on the 1977 well.
Agreed. So is there with that information that the landowner, the existing applicant, is willing to maintain their well and provided the information we've been verbally agreed to tonight from the accredited
So-
test facility, does that change anyone's opinion? Yes, go ahead, Ms. Fall.
So, to me, the motion is under consideration is to continue it to a date uncertain. And I think if we went that route and asked staff to come back at the point when, they can show that the alternative well will function, then we could decide whether to approve or deny the appeal. So I don't see any harm in waiting until we have some of those legal issues clarified before we see if the well's actually going to work before we make a decision on the appeal.
But we have a noticed final inspection on a well on that parcel, providing the adequate amount of water for a commercial cannabis grow.
No, it's the notice of final inspection in the staff report is for the well that is not on site.
That's for the contested well.
Oh.
Okay.
Because we don't have the notice of final inspection for the contested well because they have not completed the water rate recovery test.
No, that's for the 1977 well. So the
That's the-
1977 well, we have the additional document that was provided today that they were going to work with J&J to do the testing, which is on their, or assumed at this point in time to be within their parcel boundaries. But the final inspection is associated with the contested well that is presumed to be off of their, or outside their parcel boundaries.
Correct. That's what I'm saying. The alternative, the new alternative that they just proposed, we don't have it's not a permitted well yet. And you have to have a permitted well in order to have the license. So what I'm suggesting is that we continue this to a date uncertain until they come back and say, yes, we did the test, we have a permitted well, we meet the criteria in order, to get our license.
Is it possible to put it to a date certain to allow the applicant? I just don't want to leave it hanging. In other words, is there an opportunity to say, hey, in the April meeting, they'll come back and say, hey, we've got our certified testing from J&J. This is what the existing 1977 well produces, or is that on them to come back at that time?
Well, you could modify the motion to do it that way.
That way it's a certain date.
Yeah.
As far as April.
Correct.
So if they, yeah.
Well, if I may ask a question, what is the timeline for finalizing an inspection on a well?
And getting the repairs done.
So I'm not, and the only reason I think that there's a repair needed is just because of the mention by Lisa or Tom, because I honestly don't know the state of the well, so I don't want to speak to that. As far as the current well permit that was submitted, once we receive all the information, it takes approximately 2 weeks. We've actually been on site, so it might go quite a bit faster.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have some additional information to share. I know.
Your public
m-
comment is
You,
closed.
Carol, you are not the chair.
Ms. Wright, please,
Right.
public comment is closed. I'm sorry, Ms. Wright, thank you. Do we have an amendment or a subsequent motion?
I would amend that we put it off until April 15th, till we have all the information. Is that possible to have that by then, you think? Or April, whatever our next April meeting is.
To, the timelines specific to the applicant meeting all of the application requirements related to that new well permit. but from my perspective, April 15th seems too soon.
Soon?
We can leave it to,
Excuse me.
I'm sorry. There's a
Commissioner
motion.
Harper, you would need a subsequent motion. The only people that can amend would be the original maker.
So it's subsequent motion. Okay.
You can make a friendly amendment. That's fine.
It has to be accepted, correct?
It does. That is true.
Thank you, Sean.
Leaving it with a date uncertain, it allows for the process to take the time it takes, and the planning staff can bring it to us when it's ready. It's not saying it's going to continue forever necessarily. It just says that it allows them to do their jobs, do it appropriately, and bring it to us when it's ready.
May I pose a question?
Absolutely.
I guess maybe it's more of a request. Could you potentially augment your motion to clarify what would trigger? Because I know you've talked about it in discussion, but it wasn't actually part of the formal motion. So what would trigger staff re-noticing this appeal to be heard if you go forward with continuance to a date uncertain?
I think that would be a permit, a approved permit for the well, right?
That's what I would think, but the people who made the motion would have to amend it, or you and I would have to make a subsequent motion.
Well, counting yours as a subsequent motion or no? Because you could revise your subsequent motion if you wanted to.
Let me think about it for a minute. Or a friendly amendment.
Well, just maybe to clarify, to me, to come back to a certain date to answer Director Plabani's question, we would need to know which well is going to be used, if it's going to be one or both. We would need to know that the alternative well meets the criteria. And I would also like to have some clarification of what on-site means.
Yeah, I agree with the last two.
So the third part of that, aside from there being a definition that we can reference, I'm not sure what additional clarification we could provide related to how on-site is defined. Aside from that, I just want to ask if, Carol, you're amending your motion with those stipulations added.
No, I wasn't going to amend my motion, but you asked for direction from the makers of the motion, and so I'm providing direction.
Or specifically, what I'm requesting is that that be included into the motion.
My concern is that we're going to be continuing to get other information and other, data dumps and stuff. And so it's hard to enumerate all the issues that need to be clarified before this comes back to the Planning Commission.
And I totally agree and understand. However, that poses a dilemma in terms of how will I know when to notice for a date certain.
We get a court case settled. I don't know.
Yeah, and as counsel, this does need to move sort of expeditiously. It can't just sit and languish for months and months. So I would take that into account.
What is the end date? How long can a appeal sit? And
It's
how
not
long
a
have we
specific time,
started
but
yet?
it's sort of a reasonableness standard. It's not a specific time, but due process requires that justice be had within a sort of reasonable amount of time. Justice delayed is justice denied, as they say.
So
Okay,
how
well,
about a subsequent motion then? To continue to a date uncertain until staff can verify a permitted functioning well.
What if we do not so much uncertain, but by a specific date? So
Okay.
not to set a date, but say it must come back to us with or without said requested items by a set date.
By the meeting in April then. It must come back to the meeting in April then.
how about May? How about May? Just,
May is harder on. Well, anyway, no, let's just get it over with.
And I think it creates an incentive for the applicant to get their house in order. So, I mean, I'm agreeable with that. So I'll second that motion.
Can I ask for clarification? The way I heard your motion was continue to a date uncertain.
No, good.
this-
Now it'll be the date, it'll be the April meeting. So continue to the April meeting, and ideally, we need the well permit and a test proof.
So just to clarify that we are asking for the 1977 well to be finalized and for the production or for to be provided with the well test that shows that it meets minimum requirements for a commercial cannabis cultivation license, correct?
Yes.
And I will second that.
I just have one question. Are we talking first meeting or second meeting in April?
I think give it a full month. So,
Second meeting.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
So are we having 2 meetings in April now?
Are we? What is today's date?
Certainly, as I stated in my last meeting, my commitment is to schedule all meetings as necessary. So I'm agreeable with 2 meetings a month if it helps the community move along.
So a month and a half, because aren't we at our first meeting of March? And so if you want 1 month, then it would come to the first meeting in April. If you want a little bit longer to allow the process to process, then the second.
Second meeting in April. Yeah, second meeting in April.
Second.
Chair, if I may, I could give you the actual dates.
Okay.
Thank you.
The first meeting for April would be April 10th. This second meeting would be April 24th, for clarity.
So the April 24th meeting then. And if the pump test's already been done, then that information should be available shortly, I would imagine.
And the seconder is good with that
Yes, sir.
motion as it's been updated?
Yes, sir. So we have a motion and a subsequent motion. Yes, please.
Okay, we're going to vote on the subsequent motion, which is to continue the item to the April 24th meeting until staff can provide information that the applicant of CCL 803
5.
has a functioning well.
A permitted well.
Permitted.
Permitted and functioning well.
The way I wrote it down was until staff can verify a permitted functioning well.
Well, hold on, I have a question because we're setting a date and we're requiring the documents. So if the documents aren't available by that date, it's just coming without the documents, correct? We're just re-agendizing it without the documents. Just want to be clear.
I mean, ideally, the documents will be there for us with a permitted final on a well. So hopefully it's all there.
So we're asking to have it come back April 24th with or without the documents, with the intent that the documents are hopefully included.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good luck.
Chair Barrett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Harper, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Flights, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fall, how do you vote?
Aye.
A 4-0 for the subsequent motion to continue the item till April 24th.
Okay. I'd like to move on to Planning Commissioner reports or announcements.
If you're good with it, I will give a Cannabis Division Director report out while Director Presley is out of the room momentarily.
That sounds great. Thank you.
So it didn't come up as much as I thought it might in our review of the first agenda item related to the minor text amendment that, was recommended to then go to the board. And so I think that the commissioners and the affected parties of the appeal that we heard at the last Planning Commission meeting were all notified of the clarification that was provided by County Council in terms of the outcome of that agenda item being a 2-2 vote. So I just wanted to offer that up publicly. So the day following the last Planning Commission, we reached out to County Council, specifically Margaret Long, and she clarified that a 2-2 vote essentially means that the Planning Commission has taken no action and therefore the director's decision stands. So I just wanted to provide that clarification to you all. To some of the comments that Commissioner Flights stated earlier, I just wanted to offer up that essentially I don't think the general plan specifically is where we will create consistency or make improvements to our regulatory requirements related to well productivity. But that would be something that I would intend to include into the cannabis ordinance updates. And that's something that I think you all can certainly weigh in on as it relates to overall updates to zoning code. So I just wanted to say that I acknowledge your comments and certainly will plan to include them into the second draft ordinance that I will be bringing forward at some point in the not too distant future. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. So no Planning Commissioner reports, and we've heard from the assistant, the stand-in deputy director. If there's nothing else, meeting's adjourned.
Don't we still have our reports?
I asked that earlier.
Oh, okay, sorry.
If you have a commissioner report, go ahead.
No.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.
All right. Thank you.